Hi. Hello, everyone. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Are we in the room? All right. My name is Irtia Dinzy Flores. I like to use a mnemonic device to help people pronounce my first name. It's Ir-T-A. My only defense is that I did not name myself. It was my dad's idea. And I am the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, Social Impact, and Sustainability at Justworks. And just for kicks, I'm also serving as our interim culture, learning, and development lead at Justworks. And I'm so happy to be here today at Boston Startup Week. And I'm going to talk to you all about the importance of diverse mentorship, not just in turbulent economic cycles, but just in general. But we'll focus a little bit on that. And I'm going to talk to you about that from the perspective of my own experience. So to start off, I'd like to, this microphone is like not geared toward my height. To start off with, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about myself. So I actually was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I have now lived longer in the US than I have in my own home country. I am a native Spanish speaker. That is my first language. It's the language I have fun in and really connect with people in. English is very much a business language for me. And I came to the US originally to study here, to go to college. I've been learning English since the age of 5. And when I came to this country, it was really a very different experience of understanding how to connect with people because it was very new for me. And I think that forced me to develop a really, sort of to challenge myself and to develop thick skin around how to connect with people and how to challenge myself to connect with people. And so I'm going to use that as well as my professional experience to talk to you a little bit about how I overcame some of those challenges. So although I work at Justworks, which is, of course, you've heard, essentially a startup, we are ourselves, late stage, of course, and we are focused on serving small businesses and leveling the playing field for small businesses. This is really actually my first job at a tech startup. Most of my career has been at very mature companies. Also, I've worked in the public sector. I have the distinction of having served as the first Chief Diversity Officer for the state of New York. And in that role, I basically always worked on trying to provide pathways for success and contracting opportunities for minority and women business enterprises. I've worked at Time Warner, which then became Warner Media, which is now called Warner Brothers Discovery. Let's talk about going through mergers and acquisitions at another session, but a very mature and established company with a very kind of different executive bench, very creative in their mindset. And I've also worked in the nonprofit, mostly foundation sector. I worked at Robinhood, which in New York is kind of like a venture capital style philanthropy. If you will, we sort of innovated that model of using analysis and research to really inform how we would invest in philanthropic ventures. That's where I sort of started my formative years in my career, and then have also worked at the Open Society Foundation, which is one of the largest foundations in the world, and works globally. So I've had like a very mixed set of experiences, and in every one of those experiences, I've been challenged to understand those working environments, work with different types of professionals, and really find ways to connect with them. It wasn't always like that, however. When I first got here, as I was explaining to you, I had a little bit of a challenge in sort of trying to understand how to connect with people because I hadn't necessarily been exposed. And then, when was this? Shortly after I graduated from my master's degree, I had a very interesting conversation with a person who I sort of didn't know very well. I was volunteering. As you can tell, I'm one of these people that does 20 things at a time. I can't ever just do a job and nothing else, but I was working full time, and on evenings twice a week and on the weekends, I was volunteering for a program that did tutoring for new arriving immigrants in the Washington Heights section of New York. And I was doing that because I thought it was interesting. I was also doing it because it was part of an AmeriCorps program and I could get some of my student debt forgiven. And I thought that I was making an impact. And as part of that experience, I met a woman, a Latina woman. Her name is Rosana Rosado. She now serves as the commissioner of corrections for the state of New York. But I met Rosana. She is Puerto Rican, grew up in New York, and she was doing a story about Washington Heights and the emerging political sort of block of that that district of New York. And she was doing a story on this sort of like new arriving immigrants and these kids, meaning me and some of the other ones of us who were volunteering, to help these sort of new arrivals become better at what they did. And I'm saying it was a formative experience for me because Rosana is the first person who introduced me to the concept of asking for help. From someone that I didn't know very well, from someone who was decidedly more successful than me. At the time, she was the editor of a newspaper called La Prensa, El Diario La Prensa, which is one of the largest Spanish-speaking newspapers in New York. And she basically was like, wow, there's like 3 women here. You all are super impressive. I want to have lunch with you, and I want to understand more about you. And we go out to this lunch at a very nice place. For me, it was a very nice place, and she's paying for lunch, and she's asking us, you know, sort of, who are you? What do you want to do in life? And all of these things. And the very last question she asked was, what can I do for you? And no one had ever asked me that question before. And suddenly I became aware of the fact that I really was not prepared to answer that question, but more importantly, that I was not prepared to engage in an actual relationship with her because all I was doing was absorbing, right? And I wasn't prepared to sort of engage with her on a level of, I have value and you can help me sort of realize that value and that potential. Which is, in short, the way in which I approach sort of every relationship. All of us have inherent value, right? All of us can help each other realize that inherent value, and that really is the nature of a mentoring relationship, in my view. Now, I think that in the context of entrepreneurs, right, the odds are stacked against small businesses, right? So the Small Business Administration estimates that about 99% of all businesses that exist in the US are actually small businesses, right? Fewer than 500 employees. Our aim at Justworks is to serve small and medium-sized businesses, usually at around 200 employees or less, right? And so we see all kinds of challenges that these businesses are facing. And among some of the top challenges, of course, are, you know, the intense market competition. We all feel that, right? The drier VC market. I mean, all of us are so sad about that, right? It makes it very challenging. And the need to sort of align ourselves with smart, savvy people, not just people that we employ, but people who can help our business grow and take it to the next level, right? It's people we employ, it's partners, it's mentors, it's folks that could help inform our success. All right, so I'm supposed to move this thing here. So that's me. No. Okay, so what I'd like to do is start with a poll next, and I wanted to, thank you. I want to ask, for those of you in the room, for all of you to raise your hands. The folks who are virtual will be able to vote, but just so that we keep some momentum here. How many of you have ever leaned on your networks to make a tough decision about your work? There's a gentleman in blue. I mean, that's less than half of the room, sort of. I can't count that quickly. Great. And on the chat is like, yeah, well over 50%. Still coming in. For the folks in the room, because I can't sort of talk to the folks virtual unless they can chime in on the chat, can anybody who's not ever gone to a mentor for a tough decision care to volunteer sort of why that is? Anybody have any? Okay. Chatty bunch. Anyone? Oh, thank you.
it may feel like you're inconveniencing somebody without being able to give something in return. So you sort of abstain from it altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very honest answer. And I have to say, I empathize with it a lot. The thing that I've learned about that sort of premise is that, you know, there's in this moment, perhaps you can't reciprocate, right? Which is a very transactional kind of viewpoint. But there is another moment in time, if you want to be metaphysical about it, where you might actually be able to return that favor. Also, I would challenge to say that, like, maybe the value is in the exchange and that's it, period, right? It's not supposed to yield any additional sort of, you know, physical or transactional value from that conversation. And that really kind of is the point and the crux of mentoring. So I think that's one of the things that I've learned, is to get over that sort of piece of like, this has to be, you know, sort of like, you give me $5 and I get a bottle of Perrier, right? It doesn't have to be that. Sometimes it's just, I'm giving you my knowledge, and engaging in that conversation of me imparting knowledge forward is the value of the exchange. For those of you who have leaned on a mentor to make a tough decision, can anyone volunteer sort of the circumstances of what that was, and whether, and sort of what value it brought in that moment? Oh, great.
Yeah, I used my network, and specifically one of my mentors that I've known for, it seems like almost a decade now, trying to make the switch of, you know, managing a team versus becoming an independent contributor again. And trying to see, you know, it sounds like it's a great opportunity. There are pros and cons on everything, but knowing that he had the life experience and had been in that debate before, I'm happy to say I went through and I didn't feel like I was alone.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, gentleman in the blue jacket.
I've used it especially in areas where you need to pivot. And so, you know, like you have a choice of going down the same path you are, or potentially something that might work out better, and going through the pros and cons of, hey, talking it through, or sometimes I call it talking yourself out of the tree. That's the kind of stuff I think is really valuable.
That's awesome. Agree completely. That's really great. All right, let's move on, because I want us to share, and I want to go to the next slide here. The next poll, yeah. Sorry, I can't see the slide, but Madison's going to manage this for us. Okay, question number 2, because I want to go to the next poll, is how many of you find it challenging to build and or maintain your network of mentors? In the room, show of hands. Excellent. So while we wait for the results to come in from our virtual audience, anyone care to volunteer why you find it hard specifically?
I think it's hard to maintain. Sometimes building is the exciting part, and you meet someone and then you're engaging, but maintaining that network can be kind of hard, because you can get caught up in your own life and trying to build yourself professionally, personally, whatnot. And sometimes those relationships can fall by the wayside. And you think about it when maybe you need to ask them a question. You're like, man, I haven't spoken to them in 3 years.
That's right. Yeah. I am so familiar with that feeling. I will tell you, this morning I overcame that feeling. So I was getting on the plane, and I thought, I've been meaning to like text this one, you know, former boss of mine who eventually became a mentor. And the last time I saw him was like before the pandemic. And we really like haven't spoken much since. And I just like powered through it, and I just sent a text message, which literally only said, hey, Chirthia, what's up? That's it. Nothing else. And he texted back. I don't know, maybe 20 minutes later, I was in the air. But when I landed, I had a text message back, and he was like, I'm doing great. I hope everything is going well for you. The door is open, right? I think that sometimes we sort of put up this barrier, and and I think it's key to understand that a mentorship is not a friendship, right? I think those are two different concepts, right? The value of a mentorship is for you to have an exchange of ideas and experiences that is going to help you move forward professionally, and that will also help you understand yourself as a leader, right? And as a professional, in order for you to facilitate that forward advancement. A friendship is different, right? That's not the objective of a friend. I mean, I hope that's not the objective of your friendships, right? A friendship is different. And so I think sometimes we conflate the two, and then we put all of this pressure on how we're going to manage that mentoring relationship and how you maintaining, thinking that the way in which you maintain it is the rigorous way in which you maintain a friendship. I was reading this very interesting article. My brain is a sieve and I can't remember the source of it, but it essentially says that like we as human beings are only really capable of effectively retaining relationships with about 150 people, right? And so if you take that, right, the majority of those folks are going to be people that you're related to, that you see regularly, that you have a friendship with. And then there's going to be a smaller subset of folks with whom you don't have as close a relationship, a link or a network. Let's call some of the people in that network your mentors, but they have a significance in your life. And that's the way in which you want to manage that relationship, is to understand its value and its inherent value for how it's moving your relationship forward. And that doesn't mean that it has to be sort of like a fake, relationship or a transactional relationship, as I was saying before. It just means that you're managing from a different perspective. It's not about sort of planning their birthday party, but it might be about showing up with a very thoughtful gift at their birthday party. I thought about sort of like a quirky way of doing how I sort of view the maintenance of my network and relationships by using Justworks COGIS values. These are company values. And COGIS is an acronym, COGIS, and that acronym stands for camaraderie, openness, grit, integrity, and simplicity. So on the camaraderie side, we want to, have a relationship with our mentors that is really about us going through something together, right? That it's really based on that value of like, I am developing, you are helping me develop, and we're exchanging ideas because we find that mutually encouraging. Openness, be open with your mentors. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm running this startup. It takes a lot of my time and energy, both physical and emotional. And sometimes I may not be as consistent as I would want to be in my communication and in being in touch with you. Doesn't mean I don't value it. I'm just being real about the moment that I'm in, because that is the reality of an entrepreneur, right? Grit, stick to it. Just because you haven't spoken to them in a year, in my case, or a couple of weeks or a couple of months, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't reach out, that you shouldn't try to maintain that relationship to the best of your ability. Integrity, as I said, be honest, be clear about your objectives, about what you are getting from the relationship, what you expect, what they expect. Put that on the table and have the integrity to always follow through on those levels, right? Don't try to surreptitiously get other things from your mentor that you haven't been honest or clear about. I think that's one of the worst things that you can do in a mentoring relationship. And lastly, simplicity, right? Like, don't overcomplicate it. And also don't overcomplicate the way in which you maintain that relationship. One of my favorite things to do with folks or people that I mentor actually is to set up these 15-minute catch-ups or coffees or Zooms, and it's just 15 minutes, which I think is a really manageable amount of time in which to just do a checkup, to catch up, and to figure out if there's something that you can provide or that person really needs you to provide. Okay, so that's our poll. Any questions? Yes, comments? Great.
Hi. I've been on the other side. I've been a mentor, working with a startup venture fund for about now 15 years. While I've been mentoring these companies, the thing that worked very well between them and me was 4 times a year. So every quarter, they would typically send me a quick note. And even if that note was just to say, hi, I still exist. My company is, still going on or not going on, or I'm out of funds, I'm not, they may not have a question, they may not have anything else to say. but it could just be a little catch-up note, and we would sort of time it, put it up on the calendar, and I would make sure that every time I get a note, I would remind them, okay, I'm looking forward to the next note 3 months down, unless you have something urgent for me to kind of discuss before that or meet up or catch up.
Yeah.
So we would put it on the calendar to say 4 notes a year, and they would make those notes. Once they got habituated, they would then send those notes to all the mentors that they had from diverse fields. So if they had 10 mentors or 20 mentors that they wanted to maintain their network with or communication with, it kind of became a pattern, a habit which worked for them. And I thought that was a great way for some of these people to kind of stay in touch.
I think that's a great suggestion. I think that's really great. Simplicity, right? Any other comments, questions? Bring in the room your experiences for everyone. Yes. Camaraderie. Yeah. Openness. I don't know. These are our Justworks values. We use them to guide the way in which we work. Just thought it'd be neat to link the two. All right, so let's go on next. Breaking the ice. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of ways in which you can identify your network and tips for breaking the ice. On the first point of identifying your network, I sort of started by saying that I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging at Justworks. And so one of the things that I guess I'm famously quoted for saying is that you shouldn't just lean on your network because your network tends to look very much like you, right? And tends to be sometimes limited to the people who you relate to sort of on a personal level. I like to challenge folks to understand what networks they have not tapped into. Who are the people that are not represented in your mentorship bench? And so the way in which I've done this in the past is to challenge myself to look at the things that I'm not very, good at. And one of those things, you might not be surprised, is finance. I'm like terrible at finance stuff, right? And I don't mean like balancing my check account. I mean like I don't know what to do with like my stock, my shares, my like complicated finance stuff. And so one of the things I started to do at Time Warner, I was in charge of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging piece. And the head of finance for Turner, his name he is still alive. He's now the chief financial officer for AT&T. But at the time, he was the head of finance for Turner. And I would go down to Turner and talk about all of these diversity, equity, and inclusion things that I wanted him to forward in the organization. And one time we kind of finished the meeting early and I was like, Pascal, I always come here and ask you to help me with all of these, sort of forwarding these initiatives at Turner. But one of the things that I could personally use your help on is understanding, how do I evaluate my financial investments? And he's like, well, I can't really help you with that. I was like, well, you kind of can. And that's at the stage for us to have a different kind of a relationship as professionals, right? Because then I could talk to him about the thing that he did in his day-to-day that I felt could help me, but then also brought him closer to the work that I was doing because we developed, another language around which we could talk. And I have to say, I didn't have many people in my network that did that. I have a ton of people in my network who are in human resources, who are doing diversity work, but not as many people who are, chief financial officers of gigantic multinational corporations, right? So challenge yourself to find people in your network who to sort of find the gaps in your network and to identify people who could be part of that network. The most famous way in which people break the ice with me is through LinkedIn when folks reach out, and I actually do answer my messages on LinkedIn and connect with people because I think it's important because we all need a leg up. The way in which I typically break the ice with folks, I like to do it in person. I think it makes sense to do it in person. And I also am not shy about approaching people to meet them and get to know them. It's not about sort of a transactional piece. So last night, and I was saying to Victoria earlier that I'm a little tired today because I did 2 events last night in New York. And I went to this event and I knew 5 people there. And I did not talk to any of those 5 people the entire event, right? And all I want to do is just like meet a new person, understand what they do, and challenge yourself to do that. And it really can just start with, what kind of wine are you having tonight? Like, it can just really be a simple question, right? I think the other way in which I've done it in the past, I read an article, I think it's really insightful and incisive. I will send a note to the paper or to the author and say, I really like this piece. I thought it was really interesting. Here are 2 ways in which it connects with the work that I'm doing. If you ever have 15 minutes to spare, I'd love to talk to you more about it. They answer the question, they don't answer it, you lost a total of 3 minutes of your day, right? I think just, sort of, again, the object of simplicity, of not complicating the way in which what you feel you might need to get out of it. Any other experiences in the room or suggestions that folks may want to share? Yes, please.
I think authenticity is super important, because what happens is, I think inauthentic engagement versus authentic engagement is for me really important. And as I grow in my professional career, I think that it becomes almost like a bit of a defining factor as well, because that defines your engagement, that defines the relationships you build, because relationships take time to build and they take very little to really detract, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you see inauthenticity / questioning your integrity in terms of what you're really leaning on me for, I think can really take away from your brand as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, I think it's so important to not just sort of look at it as a transactional relationship, right? It's not about leaning on someone else for them to help you get ahead. It's about what is the exchange of ideas and experiences that can be, mutually informative. Okay, so let's go on to maintaining a lasting relationship. So we talked a little bit about, I sort of gave my example of sending off, a text message quickly, because I realized I hadn't talked to this person in some time. I want to start with, before sort of giving my impressions, are there folks in the room who have suggestions, or dare I say, ways in which it maybe didn't go so well when you were trying to kind of maintain a relationship with a mentor? There's no such thing as failure, that's only learning. All right. Okay, so my tips for maintaining lasting relationships is to make the communication as frequent as possible, but as sort of unobtrusive and easy as possible for the folks that I consider to be my mentors. So I consider a text message saying hello to be a very sort of low-key way of engaging with someone, sending, happy birthday wishes, sometimes celebrating their successes. I worked with a colleague at Thomson Reuters and had, sort of have been in touch with him over the years and learned through the grapevine that they'd been promoted to a CEO in their job. We hadn't spoken for a while, but I sent a really nice note congratulating them on their success. And they wrote back saying thank you, right? So great way of maintaining those relationships. I think the second thing is to be very clear on the objectives around why you're maintaining that relationship, right? I find that it's not helpful to maintain a relationship because you think that someday you may need to ask that person for millions of dollars. It's like not a good motivation for maintaining that relationship, right? The motivation for maintaining a relationship is the knowledge that you're obtaining, from that person, the relationship that you're building with that person, and how they may inform how you grow as a professional, how you grow as an entrepreneur, how you grow the success of your business. And so I think it's really important to understand, like, what is the objective of having that relationship. So one of the folks that I met early on in my career is a man named Luis Miranda, who is now famous only for being Lin-Manuel Miranda's dad, the creator of Hamilton. And I met Luis very many years ago because he is a master fundraiser. And when I first met him, my only ask to him was for him to teach me to ask for money. That was like my only ask. And our relationship over the last 20 some odd years has been entirely about that, and really nothing else much. And so I constantly am asking him for advice about how do I fundraise better? How do I ask for people? How do I ask for more money from people? And when the right time to do that is. Like, all of our conversations are basically about the ask. And that's, the objective of our friendship and our mentoring relationship. We both understand it, and we're able to talk about it in a way that's really useful for the both of us. And in a way that over the years, it has transformed into me partnering with him to raise money for some of his causes, and he partnering with me to raise money for some of the things that I feel are important. So a very clear objective, right? A relationship that yields to some kind of results, and you really understand from both sides what you are each getting from that relationship. Any other folks have examples they would like to share? Oh, great. Yes. Is there a mic? Madison? Sorry. Madison is deep in thought. She's trying to come up with her own suggestion.
Hi, thank you for sharing this session. My name is Tamana Tadla. I'm would like to share my experience, like from my professor who took me to study abroad almost 10 years ago, and then I wanted to keep that connection because I'm coming back to graduate school.
Nice.
But before I coming back to grad school, I make a connection for my company because they are running out of the budget from the global development programs. So I introduced them, and then they just kind of like create value. Now the school now adopted that project.
Excellent.
That I was work. So now I'm coming while I'm in school, in graduate school. I wanted to create the same projects, which is kind of like businesses to create for myself a learning and working environment. So
Yes.
how should I proposing this idea? Like because sometimes it's a kind of conflict of interest. It's like because going the same school and then at the same time working for the company like for this project. So I want to continue on that. Like that's a relationship, to build that relationship, and then at the same time working with them. So how should I maintain that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say this is going back to the value of sort of integrity. It's just to be transparent about your aspirations, right? I mean, there's really nothing wrong with us saying, I hope to be, I don't know, the greatest boxing champion on the planet. Maybe a little late for me, but that's an aspiration, right? And I think then the value of the relationship is for that mentor to say, let's explore ways in which you could reach your aspiration. Sadly, in my case, if I aspire to be a boxing champion, that might mean them telling me that it's too late for me. But I think, be transparent about your aspiration and engage in a conversation about how do you get to that end point. But then also be honest that maybe you might get, some advice or some reaction that may not be what you desire in the moment, right? But I think let's be transparent about your aspirations, I think is a fair one. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
I'd like to share observation or maybe experience. I noticed that in today's world, there is kind of a trend that a lot of people call themselves mentors because they can use it for their LinkedIn or for their CV. Because if you're a mentor, it means you have experience. And they kind of waste time of startup founders because there's no a genuine relationship. They just want to be mentor, but they don't want actually do the work of a mentor. And I'm sure if there are some founders, maybe they met people like that. And maybe this is just a question to the crowd. How do we deal with this trend that is happening? And how do we go about not having it just as a tagline, but a real function in our society to be a mentor?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Do folks want it? Let's take that on. There's a comment right here.
So I'm going to dive a little deeper because I'm listening to this and I'm amazed because what you're talking about is very much at odds from what I actually advise startups. And now I'm trying to think like, am I wrong? which I might be. But basically, I think that there is a difference in my mind between mentor as you've defined it so far in this talk versus like an advisor, like you would get like an advisor to a startup. Because what I always advise startups when building like an advisory board is that advisors are there specifically to help you overcome a hurdle. Like they're not long-term people at your like startup. Right. Whereas the way that you're talking about mentors, these are 20-year-long relationships. Right. And so I think there's no kind of like when people say that they're mentors on LinkedIn, they conflate the two, and it's very hard to tell the difference. And I think maybe that's what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I agree with that, which is why this is mentoring and not building your advisory board or your advisory network. I think that's a different type of thing. This is really about, a mentor is someone who is engaging with you on a one-on-one level, right? Who is helping you develop professionally and to grow yourself as a leader for your company. Did anyone else? I mean, we have 4 minutes left. We have 2 hands up. One is 3. Oh my gosh, we have 4 hands up. Can we do it? We have a minute per person. Go, rapid fire.
I'll grab all the mics I have.
Okay, let's start here, and then we'll go. I'll remember. Yeah.
Hi, this is a fantastic talk. I'm really excited. I'm wondering to talk about a relationship that has a lot of high context components, and so what are some of the brass tacks? What does it look like, in other words, for an effective mentor, for someone seeking an effective mentor? What should they be expecting in terms of what are some of the ways in which they can tell those milestones that they can tell that mentorship is effective and it's for them? What is the mentor doing?
I think we can talk more about it, but I'll just say quickly, I'll just use shorthand. You should be into them and they should be into what you're doing. I mean, just for shorthand, right? And if you don't kind of feel that, if every time you meet or tell them about some milestone you've crossed, they're not excited about it, I mean, you should kind of like rethink it. Or if you're like looking for advice on how to become better, well-rounded as a leader in some area where you're having a challenge and they have no advice, maybe you've progressed beyond what that person can offer. But let's talk more about it. But it should be like we're into each other, There's someone back there who.
Yeah, hi. I'll just talk quickly. My name is Sunny Rodriguez. I go by pronoun he, him, his. To answer the last point, I just want to contribute. Always help others rise, because people in positions of power always have the obligation to bring people up. But if you go yourself and put yourself out there, not to give unsolicited advices, but if someone asks you for help, always be there for them. So in that way, you're not only like helping them, but also instilling a lot of confidence in them. That's it.
Thank you. I do live by that. I try to give as much as I can. There were 2 other questions though in there. Oh yes, go ahead.
In terms of just comment, my name is Akash Murthy. I just joined late. In terms of somebody looking for a mentor in startup, I would advise, if I may say so, to choose somebody who has done the startup themselves. That will be the first preference. Obviously, such a person would have minimal time. And I have never met any startup founder or a mentor who is weak in economics or human psychology. Either one of those two. If you have both, fantastic. But human psychology is something that other people who are technically proficient might require reinforcement from other people.
I think that's great advice. Look for mentors that can actually contribute to the thing that you're doing, no matter what the realm. I feel like there was one other comment back there. Would you mind, sir in the red hat? Thank you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's basically, the investment that I was talking about, this friendship with Luis Miranda, like he was teaching me how to ask for money, but he knew that 20 years hence, he would be like, hey, Yurthia, guess what? Now you know how to ask for money. You got to go ask that person for money, right? Like there is, right? It comes around. So we are out of time. I thought somehow we wouldn't get here so quickly. I'm happy to talk to everyone more about my experience and sort of my, busting the doors of mentoring approach. Thank you all so much for being here. Really glad. And yeah, bye-bye, Madison.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.